Hello everyone. In this demo, I'm going to show you how you can use WSO2 API Manager for GraphQL API management. In this demo, I'm using a pre-beta pack of WSO2 API Manager 3.2. So let's get started. So this is the example use case that I'm going to use throughout this demo. So this is a product management service. So if you look at here, there is a retailer, and then there is a set of products that is sold by this retailer, and there is a set of customers who are buying these products. So I have implemented this entire service as the GraphQL API, and I have the GraphQL STL schema for that service. So here what you see is a part of that STL schema. So if you look at here, it has defined a set of types. So you can see this customer, product. These types are represented the main components of our example service. So I have this entire STL schema in a file. So let's see how we can use that to apply API management for this service that I have implemented. For that, let's go to the publisher portal of WSO2 API Manager. This is the publisher portal of WSO2 API Manager. So I'm going to log into this publisher portal using a user I have already created. So this user Peter is an API publisher. Right. Now we have logged into the publisher portal. Now let's try to create a GraphQL API to represent the API I have implemented. So here, if you look at this list, you can see this GraphQL STL schema option. So through this option, I can import my GraphQL schema. So I have to upload my GraphQL STL here. Now it's successfully uploaded. Then I'm going to next, and then in this screen I can provide the basic meta information of my API. Here I need to provide the endpoint of my GraphQL API. So I'm going to copy this. It here. Here I have to select a set of business plans and attach it to my API so that API consumers or API subscribers can pick one when they are subscribing to my API. So we have now created the GraphQL API. So you can see it's now in the created state, and since we have provided the endpoint as well as business plans, now I can publish my API. So before publishing the API, let's have a look at this API. Here look, you can see the basic metadata of this API, and here this is the most important part. You can see the operations of the GraphQL API that we just imported. So these operations were taken from the STL that we imported, and if we want to see more details on these operations, we can go to this operations tab. So here it lists down all the operations of this API as well as the operation type of each operation, and then it also shows the rate limiting policy, scopes, and security, etc. So let's talk about this in a minute. For now, let's go to this lifecycle tab, and let's publish this API so that we can subscribe and use in the developer portal. Now the API is published and it should be available in the developer portal. So let's go to the developer portal and see how we can use that. So this is the developer portal of API Manager. So here you can see the products API we just created. You can see that this is created by user Peter. So before trying out this API, we have to first log into this portal. For that, I'm going to log in from here. So I have created this user Anne. She is an application developer. So she wants to use this API in her mobile application, which she is going to develop. So for that, she first have to subscribe to this API and try out. So let's go inside this API, and here you can see there's the subscribe option here. So before subscribing to this API, you need to create an application. For that, we can go here and add a new application. So I'm going to select the effect type token. Now my application is created. So now let's go back to this API and subscribe with the newly created application. Here I'm selecting my application, and here I can select one of these business plans. So I'm going to select unlimited here and subscribe. Now the subscription is complete, but to invoke this API I need a key. For that I'm going to go to this production keys section and generate keys. Now I have created this key, and we can copy that from here. And now let's go to this tryout console. So the key is already populated to here, right? So I don't have to paste the copied key. Now let's try out this API. This is the GraphQL tryout console. So it has several features. You can try it out yourself. So it has this explorer, which is very helpful to generate GraphQL queries. So let's try a very simple one. So let's try to fetch all the products in the system. For that, I selected this. When I select this, you can see that all products was generated here. Then I can select what fields of products that I want to fetch. I want these 4 fields of each product. So let's see how it goes. Right. So you can see it gave me 3 products in the system with all the fields that I requested. So if you see here, there's a customer object, the sub objects inside the product. So let's try to fetch that as well. So I want this customer ID and customer name. So you can see it's generated here. If I run this query, you can see that each product now contains the customer section as well. So that's a basic query that we can try out using this GraphQL tryout console. So now let's go back to the publisher console and see what are the other features that we have related to GraphQL. Right, now we are back in the publisher portal. Now let's see what are the API management policies that we can apply to our GraphQL API. First, let's look at authentication policies. So if we go to this operations tab again, so you can see by default the authentication is enabled for all the operations. So that's why we had to use an access token when we try these operations out in the developer portal. But there can be cases where we want to expose certain functionalities without authentication. So when we get such requirements, we can simply disable authentication using these switches. So let's try that out. So I'm going to disable authentication for this query, this operation, but I'm going to keep the rest of the operations secured. So let's save this and go back to the developer portal and see how it works. So I'm going to clear this. So as you can see, I have removed, I don't have any tokens here, and let's try to invoke this all products. Right, so here you can see that I could fetch the results without a token. And let's try to change this. Let's try to fetch further information about this product. So I'm going to add this customer details as well. So if you remember, we only removed authentication from this all products operation. We did not disable authentication for this customer operation. So we should not be allowed to invoke this because this part requires authentication. So let's try that out. Right. So it says it's invalid credentials, or it basically says it's missing credentials. That means I can't invoke this query because of this part. So let's simply remove this and try again. Now I can invoke this query. So that way you can simply enable, disable authentication for each operation, and that will be applied in the runtime. Now let's go back to the publisher. So that was basically about API authentication. Now let's look at authorization. So by default, API Manager achieves API authorization using Auth2 scopes. So let's try to apply the same to this to our GraphQL API. So now what I want to achieve is I want to restrict this add product mutation to retailers only. For that, I need to create a specific scope for that, and then I have to attach that scope to this operation. So let's create that scope. So I'm going to create a scope called write description scope, and I'm giving this retailer role which I have already created and attach that role to this scope. So that means only the users who are in the retailer role can access this scope. So when I go to the operations and attach the scope to this particular operation, that means the users in that role, in the retailer role, only are allowed to access this particular mutation. So let's try that out. Now we are back in the developer portal. Now let's try to invoke the add product operation to which we just attach the write scope. To invoke this operation, I need an access token with this particular scope. But before that, let's try to invoke the same operation with a token which does not have this write scope. So for that, we can use the same token we used previously. So let's try to invoke that. So I'm going to the Explorer. Since what we need to try is a mutation, I'm going to add mutations. So this is the mutation that we are interested in. So I'm going to add a product in the clothing category. It's let's say trouser, and I want the ID in the response. So let's try to invoke this. So as you can see, this does not allow me to access this resource with this particular access token. That's because this access token does not contain the required scope. So now let's try to get an access token with this particular scope. For that, I need to go to the applications. I'm going to my application keys. So here, if you remember, we attached this retailer role to this write scope. That means only the users in the retailer role can generate access tokens with this particular scope. So I have a separate user who is in that retailer role. So I'm going to use that user to generate the token in this scope. So for that, I'm going to copy this curl command. So I pasted it here. So I'm going to use this user called Randy to generate this token. Randy has the retailer token, retailer role assigned, and here I have to request for this scope. Right. So as you can see, now I have received this access token with the right scope. So I should be able to use this access token to invoke the add product operation. So let's copy this. Let's go back to the API's tryout console. So I'm going to paste the token here. Explorer. So this is the operation that we tried earlier. So let's go with the same values, and I need the ID back. So this time it should allow us to invoke this. Yes, it worked. That's because this access token contains the required scope. So that's how we can enforce authorization via OAuth2 scopes in GraphQL operations. Now let's look at how we can apply rate limiting policies for GraphQL operations. So it's very straightforward. So you have two options. You can either set a rate limiting policy at the API level, like this, or you can select the set the tiers in the operation level. If you select this, you are allowed to select policies at each operation level. So I'm not going to go into details since it's very straightforward. But if you think about rate limiting policies with GraphQL, you might feel that it does not make much sense for GraphQL APIs, mainly because in GraphQL APIs you can fetch as much as data you want with just one or few API requests. That's the nature of GraphQL APIs. So we may need something more than that. So the idea of having rate limiting is to make sure that your backend servers don't get more than it can handle. So restricting the number of requests per second or minute does not fulfill in the case of GraphQL APIs. So different people use different matrices to handle this. So in WSO2 API Manager, we use two different ways for this. So one is setting a depth limit for queries. The other one is setting a complexity level for incoming queries. So let's have a look at that. So this is about query depth analysis. So as you can see here, you can define GraphQL queries like this. As you can see, this can go to as many as levels you want, and this can be cyclic as well. So this can be very expensive for the backend servers to handle. So we need a way to limit this depth of a query. So the solution is setting a depth limit. So in WSO2 API Manager, we are allowing users to set this depth limit using the subscription policies. Let's go and have a look at that. So for that, I'm going to the admin portal. So here in subscription policies, if I select, if you can remember, I use unlimited policy to when I subscribe with our GraphQL API. So I'm going to show you that policy. Here you can see in this GraphQL section you can set max depth. Let's come to max complexity later. For now, let's set a max depth value. Let's set it to 3. Right. Now it's saved. Now let's go back to the developer portal and then let's try to invoke that. So I'm creating this request with more than three depth levels. Let's see how it works. See, now we are not allowed to run this query, and it says query is to depth. So the limit it was set is 3, but our query has the depth of 5. So our query is not allowed to run because of that limit. So that's about query depth limit. Now let's quickly have a look at query complexity level limit as well. The query depth limit may not be adequate always because one can create very expensive GraphQL queries without going into much depth. That's because the cost of fetching certain nodes and fields can be higher than fetching the other nodes or fields. So to handle that issue, what we can do is we can set complexity levels for each level, each nodes and each field, and then we can calculate an aggregated complexity value for each GraphQL query. So based on that, we can decide whether this request should be allowed or not. However, there is no standard way to calculate this aggregated complexity value of a GraphQL query. So different people use different algorithms to calculate this value. So for example, GraphQL org has their own algorithm. So WSO2 Manager actually uses something similar to that algorithm. So let's see how it works. So first of all, I'll show you how you can set complexity values for fields in the API publisher. For that, I have to go to the runtime configuration. Here you can see in this query analysis section, here you can set different complexity values for each field in each type. Okay. Like that, you can set different values and set here. Now then you can go to the subscription policies as before and then set a complexity value here. Let's say set a complexity value of 5. Let's remove this value for now. Right. Now let's go to the developer portal and try to execute a bit complex GraphQL query. Okay, I think this should be complex enough. Let's try that. Yes, we got it. So it says query too complex. So it has passed the value we set in the subscription policy. So that's how you can use this complexity limit in API Manager. So with that, we come to the end of this demo. To summarize what we covered in this demo, we started with creating a GraphQL API using the SDL. Then we applied different kind of API management policies such as authentication, authorization, rate limiting with depth limits and complexity limit. So I hope you learned something about API management for GraphQL. So thank you very much. Have a good day.